Yeah, so let's get started. One person who is an nutritionist also advised me once that you don't want to sleep after a heavy lunch, have a pineapple, an apple, an orange, or something like that. Kill a cake, but I want to welcome you to this session that is looking at the internet economy and critical resources. All of us are trying to promote the digital economy. I know like the ICT master plan is looking at digital economy, and generally ICT is contributing up to 80% of GDP by 2017. In the same way, they are also looking at ICT creating about 180,000 jobs by 2017. They are looking at having 50 regional powerhouses in the ICT sector as companies that can compete in this sector. The digital economy will be one of those pillars. So the team I have here, we'll start with Toilem Poriot from KENIC. I have Jaco. Jaco talked to us in the morning from UNESCO, and Michuki Mwangi. Victor Kyalo will join us if he comes on time. So we will proceed, we'll give him his chance. Just to set the stage, I thought that I do this slightly differently, and I'll brief the presenters before I give them. They are 10 minutes. One of the things I think we need to start answering is what are the enabling factors that we need for digital economy? The laws, regulations, policies, compliance, the infrastructure, and how critical is this to drive the digital economy? Can we name elements of those infrastructures and how we need to manage those? How do we get people really to do business online? How do we build that confidence, that trust, so that they can, people can freely use online resources in terms of driving digital economy? And what are the current innovative initiatives or ideas that will reinforce this growth of digital economy? Are there risks pertaining to this space? And how are we addressing those? So what are those risks? And how prepared are we to address those? Thank you. So what I will do is, I'm not going to go top bottom, I'll start bottom up. So, Mr. Poriot, with your 10 minutes, use those also to introduce who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Toilem Poriot from KENIC. And basically today I think we're going to talk about critical infrastructure. And maybe just to start it, for maybe people who are new to Kenya ITF, I know this has been discussed with online discussion and all the other platforms that are available. Maybe to just highlight how, for me, I look at critical infrastructure is how I perceive. Maybe at the moment, there's different levels of a person, for an individual to look at critical infrastructure. You can try and look at a personal level, which I'm sure it is not what you have come here to discuss. Like for me now, my critical infrastructure is this laptop. If it goes off, I know I can maybe not do the presentation, but that is not what you have come to discuss. We're looking at it at a more higher level, where we look at our resources at a national level, at the global level. What is the effect of maybe having an infrastructure like the internet? You can't access the internet. Maybe you look, there was a time in Kenya we had one of the cable cards, the submarine cards, and most of us do not access the internet. What are the effects of that? How is that affecting the economy? So I think that is what we have come here to look at. And how are we going to manage and maybe how are we going to manage and protect the critical infrastructure? So for me, I look at critical infrastructure at the governance level. That is at the administration level. So at the administration level, you'll have to look at things like how are you going to protect critical infrastructure like the DNS? How are you going to protect critical infrastructure like the IP addresses, RIRs, and names and numbers? What organizations are there? Those organizations that are there, what are they doing really to protect this infrastructure? Again, at the administration level, you'll have to look at infrastructure at the application level. For me, I look at the application level, like most of us, I know in this room, all of us have Gmail accounts. We might not say it's not that critical, but just imagine you cannot access your Gmail account right now. And maybe that is what you're used to. So at that level, again, how is it going to affect the economy? So looking at critical infrastructure again, because here we are talking about internet infrastructure, so we'll not look at the environmental infrastructure like power, funding, so we'll just look at what affects the internet. So when we go to the infrastructure, most of us again depend a lot on our mobile devices. So how is that going to affect the economy in case, let's say, all the mobile providers that we have, they don't, the services fail? How is it going to impact the economy? We rely a lot on M-Pesa, mobile payment solutions. What if all of those mobile solutions are not available? So we need to look at it in that perspective. How are we going to protect all these resources? We look at infrastructure in terms of peering, like exchange, ISPs. We need to look at it in the routing perspective again, security. So those are some of the things for me. I look when we mention critical internet resources. For me, I look at it, those resources that we really depend on. It doesn't matter at what level. We really depend on. It can be at the application level. It can be at the infrastructure level. You can look at it at the infrastructure perspective. Like for me now, I can look at it, since I'm in KENIC, I can look at it at the DNS perspective. What are the effects of the economical effects of an infrastructure like the DNS for the country called Kenya failing? How is it going to impact your business? Because you'll find most of us have our website and it depends on the DNS. Again, you'll find most of us have businesses and rely on the internet that is provided by our ISPs. So we need to look at it. How are you going to, how are we protecting these resources? How are we going to make sure that these resources, in case they fail, actually there are measures in place that will ensure that you don't really go into you don't have a lot of loss. Maybe I'll just highlight some of the things like the risks. I'll mention the risk, the risks that maybe of not managing critical infrastructure, the risk of not having policies in place to manage or protect these infrastructures that we rely on. We look maybe at solutions like payment solution, e-commerce platform, because we have seen our government is going more on the internet, on the e-commerce platform. We need to reduce a lot the cyber. We are using a lot of online applications. Now, how are we going to protect the users? Can you look at how are we protecting the users who are using those services? Like today, if I go and I want to renew my driving license, how am I being protected? So that in case something happens, in terms of security, in terms of availability, like the other day we were doing our returns. Actually, I have not filed mine up to now because I cannot upload it. It fails, and you have to pay for some penalties for doing. So how are we going? Users as us, how being protected? Is there somebody who is looking at the perspective of a user? You deploy maybe a system, but it's not available. It's not that reliable. Is there somebody who is looking at to ensure those services are available? I'll look at again how we are going to. I think I'll mention this. How we going to protect critical infrastructures like internet, mobile service providers, application level providers, and the administration level. I think for me that is just it. I'm sure I will not use 10 minutes. Thanks.
Yeah, give him a round of applause. wengine wamelala hapa, they are not clapping for it. I don't know. I hope, I wish there was just Opatia after this, when I come once. One of the things that I think that we also need to think about is the interconnectedness. We are more and more depending on IP networks and run things like our telecommunications, our power, energy distribution for metering and all those. What does this imply? So think about it as we move, but also tell us where we are and what we need to do in order to move forward. I'd like to give this chance to Jaco.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words on internet economy and critical internet resources, even though it is not exactly the field in which UNESCO specializes. But when I looked at the questions, my first reaction was actually to say, why do we jump to the conclusion of e-commerce when we talk about the internet economy? There are other elements that need to be taken into account. Yes, we need resources. When we talk, yes, we need infrastructure. But there's a very important element that's missing for me. And that important element is intellectual property. We cannot talk about our knowledge-driven economy, our knowledge economy, if we do not talk about intellectual property and we are specific in terms of what we want to promote, how do we promote localness, how do we promote international exchange, etc. And when I look at the second question that asks, are we investing in the right direction, I would like to change the question and rather say, are we using available resources in an equitable way? And here I would like to talk specifically about the link between internet economy and the way that we spend public funds to create content, and to which extent we give citizens actually the right to use that information or not. I'm coming to one of UNESCO's subjects in which we intervene, which is openness. We have a program that looks specifically at open solutions, where we look at content, technologies, and processes through which we could promote the use of ICTs. And there we talk about open access to scientific information, we talk about open educational resources, we talk about open software, and other elements. So the reason why I mention this is because we spend public money on content creation. But do we need to buy it again? Do we not have the right to use it so that it builds our economy and that it feeds our economy to become a world-class economy? So I think for me the question is really, are we using available resources, especially public resources, correctly by licensing our material openly or not, or recognizing copyright and other intellectual property rights? And I think these are important. And when we talk about that, I think especially in view of the internet economy, we also need to start talking about different business models in which open access, in which open education resources and other of these openness elements come in. Because I don't know of many people that actually talk about the different business models that apply to each one of them, because they are different. And for me, that's one of the risks, that we do not take business models that take openness into account, and we do not explore what are the options that we need to take further. When we look at the policies that need to be in place, yes, we have the ICT Master Plan that aspire to a knowledge economy, but nowhere we talk about intellectual property. how can we become a country that actually wants to make use of knowledge to come somewhere if we do not recognize that element? So for me, that is another risk, that we do not take the question of intellectual property serious and the options that are available. And secondly, I want to say that we do not encourage that openness in terms of OERs, in terms of open access and other options that exist. The master plan talks about MOOCs and talks about exchange of information, but they don't say what are the options that we can actually take into account to promote that interconnectivity, to promote that exchange of information. Because by exchanging it, we can lose that value of the knowledge society, and we as a society will not be able to take that into account. So that's another risk. This said, I do think that the irony of the whole situation is that, for example, the sessional paper 14 of the Ministry of Education actually does encourage the education sector to make use of open education resources. The problem is when it was put into the paper, nobody knew what it was. And that's another risk, is that we do need some advocacy in terms of what are the options and the business models that are available when we talk about knowledge creation. And this knowledge creation can be actually a very important element of innovation. Just a brief example. UNESCO just helped TSC and the Ministry of Education to create an online course on ICT integration in education, and all the materials were openly licensed and took from international open education resources. Once we finished the course and ran the course, teachers asked us, we want more local content. And that is what is important. When you start interacting with content, you start valuing the importance of local content. And through the use of openness, there's a process in place where people work together, where people exchange information, and then construct new knowledge. So that process needs to be taken into account. And to which extent do we actually encourage those processes to happen in our private sector, in our government sector, in our schools and other institutions? That is important. When we want to go the way of innovation, we need to create that culture of exchange, those processes where people are actually allowed to exchange information without breaching copyright, so that they can create new knowledge. So I think this is very much important. Of course, the infrastructure is extremely important so that we could not only access it, but also make use of all the opportunities there are to exchange information, to create new information, etc. And I would like to add the last point that is extremely important, and that is, when we create these opportunities, to which extent do we actually create job opportunities so that young people can go into the knowledge economy and form part of this internet economy and create their own internet resources that are relevant for the key context. Thank you very much.
Hey, you guys are that question. You told us about openness. The question, for example, in the education sector is, KE is a gatekeeper on approving content for schools. KE produces content for schools. Is this an open system? Secondly, how do we encourage others other than the traditional publishers, number one, traditional publishers, so that we can increase the scope of content, say, and let the content creators find value in continuing producing quality content? Those are questions to raise, and I think he has made the point very, very well. Infrastructure. the infrastructure reliable and dependable to drive this digital economy? What are the risks associated with it? Are we there? So, as you mark these questions, I want to ask Michuki Mwangi to also give his remarks. Yes, you have 10 minutes, right?
Okay.
Some time.
I will try. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michuki Mwangi. I work for the Internet Society, focusing on regional development work here in Africa. We have a regional bureau which is focusing just on Africa, only of every region, the 5 regions of the world. We have a bureau with a team that looks at the issues with respect to internet development that affect that particular region, and we focus on development in each of those regions. This afternoon, I've been given a task to talk about the internet economy and critical internet resources from an ISOC point of view. And there were a couple of questions which were asked as part of the discussion points, and I would like to try and cover this as we discuss through what ISOC is doing and how we perceive these issues. So when we talk about the internet economy, one of the things that comes to mind is what are we really referring to, or what has made the internet actually become an economy by itself? What has triggered this? And I'd like to take us back a few steps and just to have a look or a better understanding of why the internet is the way it is. And the reason being that when we go back and trace how the internet was established, we find that it was built on 3 main principles. First, the internet is end-to-end, meaning your device, your phone, your laptop, your computer can talk to another computer at the farthest point of the world, end-to-end, meaning there is transparent communications from one point to the other. Secondly, the internet was designed as a layered architecture, meaning for those who have done IT technical course, you will have covered through the OSI layer model and shows the different layers of communication. So it is layered architecture, which means every part has a function to play. And those components or those different layers play a critical role to the way the internet operates today. And lastly, there's something we call open standards, meaning for the devices and the communications to take place, we depend largely on open standards. That means when I send you a file, because it's an open standard, regardless of what terminal you have on the far end, you'll be able to access and read the file. Now, but let's go to the final part of understanding how those open standards are developed. And in doing so, you will understand that there is actually, what I would say, mutually agreed norms as to how open standards are developed. And there are really just 5 principles to open standards development. First is cooperation. Without cooperation, standards won't get developed. Secondly, there is to the adherence to the principles of standards development. They all have to adhere that we are developing standards and these are the principles. In those, there is things like due process, we must follow a due process. There's broad consensus that this is a standard. Otherwise, for instance, we have been talking about IPv6, but we had to reach a point of consensus and say, yes, we are running out of IPv4 address space, and we need a new protocol to help us move to the next level, but what is it going to be? So there must be some level of consensus, broad consensus on the way they are moving forward. Transparency, issues of balance and openness in that standard development. And equally, there was also a need for collective empowerment, meaning everybody must feel empowered to get involved in the process of standards development. There also must be voluntary adoption. So once the standards are developed, all the people involved in standards development must, in producing devices, must adopt those new standards. Otherwise, they will not be used. So IPv6, again, using that as an example, once it was ready, all the vendors must update their systems or produce hardware and software that is IPv6 capable. Again, that is voluntary adoption. So those are some of the things that underpin the success of the internet. So before we talk about the economy, it's good to understand where are we coming from the perspective of where the internet has reached to become an economy by itself. So looking at all those points, the one thing that leads you to see is that the internet actually just provides for permissionless innovation by design. It enables permissionless innovation by design. So you would like to look at the internet economy as what we know of today, but I would like to think of the internet economy as what we don't know. Because we are looking today at things like the .ke namespace, online sales, marketing, Facebook, etc. But think about it as what we don't know yet. We're only coming online. We are only coming of age to get online. But what are we going to innovate as Africans, as Kenyans? The Global Internet Summit just showed the potential. But just in 5 years' time, what will come out of this region? And are we thinking about policies and the risks that are associated with the things that we are yet to innovate? So, I'll mention something, and I know I'm quickly running out of time. When we talk about the internet, we look at it from a very futuristic point of view, but I'll say from the year 2020. What's our vision? Our vision by the year 2020 is that 80% of the content we access in Africa, 80% of that should be local, and we should only be getting 20%. At present, we're importing 99% of it. It's only 1% that we're generating from the region. Now, if by the year 2020, we will be at 80%, it means a lot of that has been created by virtue of what the internet enables us to be able to do. So then what happens at that point in time? What are the concerns? The first concern we've had, and we had a lengthy discussion about it this morning, is security and privacy. Our view is that when we talk about this, the first thing, of course, we need to think about is the infrastructure behind it. How are we going to get to this 80-20? To get to 80-20 means we need more internet exchange points, we need IP address space, we need strong country code top-level domain names that are able to support this. We need infrastructure like data centers, carrier-neutral data centers, where people can actually host locally as opposed to hosting abroad. So all that needs to take place. But once the ecosystem is well formed, and we are all hosting locally, and we are at 80-20, and this is the year 2020, what's the biggest thing we're going to worry about? Security. What's happening to the information? So what are we going to, what is the approach we're going to take to deal with this? And we're thinking about it from what we are referring to as collaborative security, meaning we need to foster confidence and protect the opportunities. We need to have collective responsibility as the users of the internet. We need to ensure that the fundamental properties and values of the internet are protected. Because when we get to 2020 and we realize, oh my goodness, 80% of the traffic we're using is here, but at the same time we're totally afraid of putting anything online, the first thing we're going to try and do is break the fundamental principles of the internet to say, please block it. So whatever we do at that point, we need to make sure that we protect or preserve the fundamental properties and values that make the internet what it is. we also need to know that it will be evolving. 2020 is just one timeline. We are talking about Vision 2030. So what will be happening then? How do we develop policies and frameworks that are not cast in stone, but can actually evolve? And there is broad consensus, meaning there is a process for us to actually give input for these policies and frameworks to keep evolving as the times go and the evolutions come in. And lastly, we need to think globally. Think large. None of our products has made it global, but think large. Think M-Pesa going global. Now, think of the next app or node solution that's going to come from our country. We'll go global. And then you start acting locally. But as you develop the policies, as you develop the infrastructure, the systems, understand that think global, though the implementation starts at the local. So, concluding, I see my alarm has gone off. Some of the things which we need to do is, for instance, when we mention about collaborative security and the issue of collective responsibility, one of the areas we need to look at is what are the operators doing? And this is something we've tried to initiate internally at the Internet Society, working together with the Internet Engineering Task Force. Is how can we get operators to sit together and agree to implement what we call best practices when it comes to certain aspects of network security? Because that's when you know the networks are better built, they implement best practices, you feel a lot more confident using the resource, right? You feel a lot more confident using the internet. So we are working on something we are called good manners, but I don't mean like the normal manners. It's an abbreviation of what we called mutually agreed norms for routing security. So it's MANRS, but we pronounce it as manners. So I can say good manners. So what are the good manners for operators to have? What are some of the issues they need to pay attention to? And we're looking at things like, are the operators doing filtering? Are they applying things like that protect them from the end users from being spoofed, anti-spoofing techniques? Is coordination and collaboration taking place? Are they working together with SATs and other entities to make sure that is working? Is there global validation of what's going on the internet? Meaning I am validating the information that this person is the one who is meant to send me this information before I actually accept it. So those are highly technical. I'm just putting them at a very high level because I would not want to assume that everybody in this room is technical. But they are global